Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Glad you could all make it. As usual, and as I remembered this time to actually put in a pinned chat message, I will be answering questions that were submitted ahead of time by my Patreon patrons and my channel members for the first section of the show. So if you're joining us live in the live chat, hi everybody in the live chat, and you have a question that you want me to answer or something you want to talk about or get my response to, or most especially if you were planning on being generous and donating a super chat during the stream tonight, which are always encouraged and welcomed and greatly appreciated. If possible, try to hold all of that stuff until later, until I get through the patron and member questions, because while I'm answering the patron and member questions, I will not be paying super close attention to the live chat. So I might miss whatever you have to say or whatever you have to offer. So please hold on to it if you can. And I will get to the live chat after I get through with the patron and member questions. So, without further ado, let's turn to the patron and member questions. And the first one of those comes from my pal Eric Allen, who says, "All right, Steve, let's say you're the HR director for the second Death Star. Given that most people know what happened to the first Death Star, what benefits package would you offer to get people to work on it? A signing bonus? Long-term care options? 2 weeks paid vacation on the forest moon of Endor? Life insurance with a clause about being choked by a Dark Lord of the Sith? You have to admit, they were pretty lackadaisical before Vader showed up to put them back on schedule. Perhaps that HR director handed out too much PTO. Anyway, hope you're well, my friend." Well, I hope you're well as well, Eric, my friend. And I think all of those suggestions are pretty good. I would also add, I mean, let's not forget we're talking about the evil galactic empire here, so they could build in some incentives that they had no intention of ever uh, following through on. You know, like they could have offered some kind of guarantee to the Death Star workers that this one's definitely not blowing up. You feel safe coming to work for the Empire and working aboard the new Death Star, because we guarantee that it's not going to blow up this time. Or maybe something like some kind of enhanced escape system, so that even if the rebels somehow manage to do the impossible, which they're not gonna, but just hypothetically, if they somehow manage to do the impossible and blow up this second Death Star, there's no way they're blowing up 2 Death Stars in a row. Come on. But if somehow they happen to blow up this Death Star as well, don't worry, because our brand new enhanced escape system will guarantee that you get out of the exploding Death Star safely and in time. We have strategically placed escape pods on every level in every section. You'll have plenty of time to get there, and there's a quick launch system that will push you to a safe distance right away. And they have specially designed patented concussively resistant shields that will make sure that they will survive the explosion. And there's no way, if you are on the Death Star if it explodes for a second time, there's no way, if you make it to one of these escape pods, that you are going to die. It's absolutely guaranteed. And the truth is, it doesn't matter. They might not have any escape pods on the fucking thing. They're the evil galactic empire. Who cares? But they could promise that, to see if they could get some more suckers in there to work on their Death Star. But that would be my contribution to your other excellent suggestions. Yeah, that's what I think. Next question is from Stephen G. Clenard, who says, "Steve, you're a DC Comics guy. Maybe you can help me with some questions that have been vexing me for some time. Which superheroes do you think are most likely to dress up for Halloween? What would they dress up as? I think it would be funny if both Superman and Clark Kent received invitations to a prestigious costume party, and he decided that both persona would attend, dressed as the other, using his super speed to switch costumes to fool the guests. His clever scheme would work like a charm until Jimmy Olsen decides to get a photo of the two together. Uh-oh, how does he get out of this fix?" Speaking of which, do you think this would make a good premise for a villain crew, the Trick or Treat Gang? Once a year, this roving band of rambunctious ragamuffins run rampant through the neighborhood, dressed in costumes and issuing threats of unspecified low-grade property crimes to extort candy from compliant owners. Thoughts? I love that idea. And I would just add that they are Batman villains, and it is impossible for Batman to catch them. They outsmart Batman at every turn. He never catches the Trick or Treat Gang. They never do anything that bad, but Batman tries and fails on multiple occasions to capture them, and they're always one step ahead. That's the only thing I would add to that otherwise excellent premise of a villain crew. And yeah, I love your Superman and Clark Kent dressing up as each other idea for the Halloween party. How he would get out of that fix would depend on whether we're writing it in the Silver Age or the modern age. If we were writing it in the Silver Age, the solution is obvious. He has one of his Superman robots from the Fortress of Solitude close by, and he can swap the Superman robot out for Superman, and he can be Clark Kent in the photo of Jimmy, and then you can use the super speed to stash the Superman robot, because you wouldn't want to let the Superman robot play Superman like all night at the party. Somebody would eventually figure it out, but just have him there for a few minutes for a picture, that'd be fine. So have a Superman robot. Or if it was the modern age, you would just have your old pal, the Martian Manhunter, shapeshift into the form of either Clark or Superman and take the picture that way. And then, and then be like, all right, thanks, John. And he can, shapeshift back into whatever his normal Halloween costume was or whatever. I also really like the idea of having like the Daily Planet Halloween party and Clark dresses up as Captain America and everybody looks at him and they're just like, no, I don't see it. that for some reason, that idea charms me. But yeah, the Trick or Treat Gang is a good idea. And they would be Batman's annual nemesis that he would never ever defeat. Danny K says, hey, Steve, heck of a season finale on Lower Decks. Where do you think they're going with this? I think Tendy's transfer from medical to science will coincide with the arrival of T'Lyn, the rebellious Vulcan, aboard the Cerritos. But the big question, of course, is who is trying to frame the captain? Thank you very much. Hope all is well. I assume it'll be the Pakleds or that Klingon dude who was behind the Pakleds or some other, power behind the power behind the power. I imagine it'll probably be something like that. I was, as anybody who watched my review that went up this week knows, I was pretty underwhelmed by Lower Decks this year. And so I can't say that I'm all that invested in what the resolution to the cliffhanger is. But if I had to guess, it would be something like that. And yeah, I would imagine, I don't know if T'Lyn and Tendi, if Tendy's transfer will have anything to do necessarily with T'Lyn coming in, but that would be an obvious way to go. And I do think T'Lyn is probably going to be on the Cerritos next season. I guess I don't know why else they would have that scene, in T'Lyn's episode at the end where her captain says, I'm sending you to work on a Starfleet ship. So I would imagine that's what that was setting up. I can't imagine any other reason for it to be there. And T'Lyn being a science officer in the tradition of Vulcans working on Starfleet ships and Tendi being transferred to science, it would make an obvious sort of pairing there, and Tendi being the really super emotional one and T'Lyn being the Vulcan who, doesn't display emotions. It wouldn't surprise me if they went that direction. But yeah, Lower Decks is very with me. Carlisle the Cinephile says, hey, Steve, I recently played through The Last of Us Part 2, and it got me thinking about the concept of revenge stories in fiction. There are plenty of stories about how revenge is a pointless and self-destructive pursuit, that it doesn't make the pain go away and only causes more suffering. But there are just as many stories where getting revenge is shown to be a very cathartic experience, and the audience is meant to feel satisfied when they see the protagonist get payback. We're supposed to be horrified when we see Captain Ahab's quest for vengeance cost him not only his life, but the lives of most of his crew. But we're also supposed to cheer when Inigo Montoya finally defeats the six-fingered man. What are your thoughts on these conflicting perceptions in how stories depict revenge? Why do you think they're both equally common? Which do you like more, the tragic cautionary tales or the cathartic power fantasies? Well, I think that there are there are conflicting perceptions that are both very popular, because I think there's a diversity of opinion among not only the audience but among storytellers as to the value of revenge in and also not only the value of revenge like in real life, and revenge versus forgiveness, and which direction should we go in our own lives, but also the value of revenge as an engine of story. Sometimes it's the right move to have the character forego their revenge and take maybe a more humane or a more thoughtful approach, and sometimes it's the right thing for the story to have them follow through and kill the guy who killed their father or whatever. And it depends on the story, and it depends on what kind of story you're trying to tell. I think both can work. I don't really have a strong preference one way or the other. I think both can work if they are done properly. Um, One of my favorites from recent memory, relatively recent, it's been like 15 years now, because boy, I'm getting old. Is the Kill Bill movies, Tarantino's Kill Bill movies, because they kind of ride the line between the two types of revenge stories that you're describing here. We see the bride take her revenge on Bill. Ultimately, spoiler alert, she does kill Bill at the end of the second movie. And it is presented as a cathartic experience and a just thing. Bill deserves it. And I think we're meant to think that Bill deserves it and to be on her side when she kills him, and to think that this is a just sort of fulfillment of her story. But at the same time, it's also presented in a way that makes it seem kind of sad, that makes it seem kind of elegiac. And the relationship between these two characters is shown to us to be complex to a degree that we can, and if we follow the directions of the story, should take pleasure in Bill's death and in the fact that the bride gets to kill him, but also feel a little sad because they did, prior to this split between them, they were very, very close, and they did have a great love for each other. And part of them still does when we get to the end of the second movie and they have their confrontation, even though there are no misunderstandings. She is there to kill Bill, and Bill knows it, and she knows it, and she knows that's what's going to happen. Either she's going to kill him or die trying to kill him. They still have this wonderful scene with each other that shows that they still have a lot of love and respect each for the other, and that the bride has come to kill Bill because that's the right thing to do. That's her right as his victim, as the wronged party. And what Bill has done, his crimes that he has committed are worthy of that. But even so, she doesn't take as much pleasure in it as she maybe thought she would before she got there. So I think that's a really, really interesting way to play it. That it is cathartic. It is, yes, revenge is the right decision here. It would not have had the same power if she had stayed her hand and said, you know what, Bill, I forgive you. But at the same time, it does have that layer of tragedy to it. So I think that's a really, really smart way to put it. That's, and a very thoughtful and sort of, writerly way to present it. So yeah, I really like how it's played in Kill Bill Volume 2, but it depends on the story. And I think both are equally common because revenge and its opposite number, forgiveness, are both very, very rich soil that you can use to grow a story. And it just depends on which one you want and what kind of story you're trying to tell. John Burns. Hey, Steve. Sad news about the shooting on the set of the movie Rust. Alec Baldwin was the lead and also is listed as one of the producers of this movie. Yet the filming continued after his own stunt person had 2 discharges happen earlier in the filming. It didn't happen when many union members walked off the set. It didn't happen when he would be handling the gun. Was it ego? I can do this. I'm Alec Baldwin. Fear? I'm getting older. I don't know how many more of these I can do. What about the budget? We don't have money for post-production, so we'll use a prop gun. What about the return on our investment? IASD is threatening to strike, and we want our money back fast, so we don't want delays in post-production. There are some who say that since Alec was a liberal, he was playing around with a gun, but he's 63. I think he's been on sets with guns before. Sometimes it's not simply one thing. There will be changes, agendas promoted, but this is multifaceted. Your thoughts? Yes, I agree with you. I think it is definitely multifaceted. There was an account published earlier, I think earlier today, that purports to be the most complete record of what actually happened on the set. I have not read that yet, so I don't know specifically what the latest is as far as the chain of events that led to this tragic shooting. Um, but I do think it's multifaceted. I certainly don't think it's fair to blame Alec Baldwin for it, or to blame Alec Baldwin primarily for it. I mean, yes, he is the person who was holding the gun, and yes, he is listed as a producer on the movie. But I find it very hard to believe that he would have had anything to do with the preparation of that gun. And as you point out, he's been on movie sets before, and if you're an actor in a scene and you're getting ready to play a scene and an assistant director or a prop master or somebody hands you the gun, you assume that it's ready to go, and that it's safe, and that it will, whatever it needs to do in the scene, it will be ready to do, and do in a safe way. So, he just, I assume, unless there's something different about it that comes out in the details of the story that I haven't read yet, I assume that's what he was thinking. And when he fired the gun, he assumed that it was going to be safe. So I don't think it's fair to blame him. But yeah, I think the sloppiness of the stunt coordinator, um, the issue with the more experienced union members walking off the set and being replaced by temporary workers who did not have the same um, experience and know-how. Um, and I think also just the simple fact that that there's even any such thing as a live round on a movie set. I find it ridiculous that there are even working firearms on movie sets at all that, you know, could potentially fire a round that would be dangerous to someone. I think that's ridiculous. They just shouldn't have it. I mean, you say there should be no money there. You said maybe one of the issues was maybe there wasn't money for post-production, or they couldn't just go back in post and digitally add, the gunfire effects, the smoke and the sounds and stuff. Like it was cheaper for them, I suppose, to have a practical effect on the set. But I mean, surely there are even ways to do practical gunfire effects on a set that don't involve a projectile coming out of the barrel of a gun ever. There must be better ways to do this, either through practical effects or through, like post-production. And I just don't think that this kind of thing should never even be a possibility. It's ridiculous to me. So I think that's a big issue with it as well. But yeah, I don't think it's fair to blame Alec Baldwin for it. I assume he feels absolutely terrible for it. I mean, Alec Baldwin has had a lot of issues and has been shown to be a huge asshole in a lot of different ways in his personal life over the years, as a spouse and a parent. But I mean, I'm sure he feels absolutely gutted about this, and I don't think it was anything that he personally did to cause it. Again, having not read the latest descriptions of it, I stand ready to be corrected if I'm just not informed about that. But yeah. David Colby, during World War II, the Nazis tried to build several wonder weapons that would win them the war, ranging from jet airplanes to super tanks to Vengeance Weapon 3, which were massive mineshaft-sized cannons aimed permanently at London. Fucking Nazis. Most of these super weapons were canceled early on in their production because they didn't work. But imagine a world where the Nazis tried to build the Rata, a tank the size of a large church with battleship guns. Uselessly slow, immediately destroyed by air, and easily wiped out by infantry sneaking up behind it, it would have taken the place of hundreds of tanks that actually worked. which Nazi superweapon that would never have worked and just hastened the end of the war in the Allies' favor would you most want to see? Their space program, their submarine tank, their fucking useless ass helicopter backpacks, the Rata, the even bigger Rata that was armed with an artillery gun for some reason. I have to plead ignorance here. I am by no means an expert or even very well informed on all of these potential Nazi superweapons. So you were really schooling me here. I had no idea about any of this stuff. Nazi military history has never been one of my favorite subjects. So this all sounds nuts. I mean, I believe it. It sounds exactly like some shit that the Nazis would try to do. Like, I completely believe it, but it sounds completely nuts. Helicopter backpacks? Really? Yeah. And I love a tank the size of a church with battleship guns, and then an even bigger one of those. Like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. I don't know. I mean, having not been up on the subject at all, I can't really say which one I would have preferred. Maybe if Hitler had actually gotten the Spear of Destiny and had truly believed that it made him invincible, and he had walked to, the front line of some major battle holding the Spear of Destiny, expecting that he was just going to be able to, fell the entire Allied army with the power of the spear, and he ends up just getting shot like a million times and killed. Maybe that. Does that count? I mean, I know this. I'm not sure exactly how historical that is, or how much effort. I am told that the tales of Nazi um, occultism and such are a little bit overblown, that there definitely was a faction of the Nazi leadership that was interested in that stuff, but that they did not have nearly as much influence as some people would later say, and that there was not nearly as much effort expended on the Indiana Jones type stuff as some people might believe or want to believe. But yeah, I'll go with the Spear of Destiny that ends up getting Hitler killed because he's a credulous dumbass. Kier says Dune. If you walk with rhythm, you'll attract the box office receipts. I've seen the first Dune movie, so I get that. Dune seems to be the starting point for a lot of sci-fi. So, what basis for a Star Trek episode would you use to make a full film series as a separate entity? The Magnificent Ferengi, Tin Man, Threshold. Some of my favorite DS9 episodes are the ones with Benny. My favorite TNG episode is The Inner Light. I thought of combining them and have a writer on a doomed planet dreaming of a starship captain who is being attacked by a mysterious probe. The captain's crew is giving the writer ideas about how to solve the planet's oncoming problems. We're never sure if the planet is dreaming about saving, if the captain is dreaming about saving the planet while under the influence of the probe, or the writer is dreaming of the ship to solve the planet's problems. What do you think? Keep up the work, good and otherwise. That your idea sounds like an interesting idea. And as far as what Star Trek concept would I use to blow up into a full film series, or a film or series? Let me see. That's a good one. I mean, you could maybe do something with the Maquis, although that has been. I mean, you have to be careful that you don't end up getting too close to Firefly, because even though you know, the rebellion type stuff going on in Firefly was not the centerpiece of the story, it was more happening in the background, and the main characters were bounty hunters. The I would want to be careful that I didn't get too close to that. But the idea of centering the story on a group of people that were something like the Maquis, that had similar motivation, where their homes had been traded away to a former enemy by what was supposed to be their representative government, and as a result they felt they needed to turn to violence to win back their homes, or at least win some kind of independence from what had become an unjust authority. Like, I think there's sci-fi potential there, and allegorical potential there, with maybe doing some kind of an allegory with the plight of Native American tribes being forcibly displaced in American history, and other colonized peoples being mistreated and moved off of their land, or seeing their natural resources taken from them by some stronger colonial power. I feel like there might be potential there. So maybe there's something to do with the Maquis. Maybe if I could find a fresh angle on it that didn't seem too much like the Maquis or too much like other sci-fi films and series with very similar premises. But yeah, something like that. Maybe, I don't know. Just that's just off the top of my head. Um, some random geek who says, "Happy Ace Week, mutter fluffers." Oh, the language. I had interesting conversations with someone in a Discord server. This person used to be super left, but now tries to see things, quote, from all sides, unquote. Is a trans woman who likes Blair White, hates censorship, and loves 4chan for not doing moderation or censorship. Believes censorship is the biggest problem in the world. Believes ableism is just Tumblr shit. Believes we don't live in a white supremacist patriarchal society. Thinks asexuality is not a thing. Stands for Dave Chappelle. Says there are only two genders and that it isn't bigotry, just a difference of opinion. She also fight lol icon rights because, according to her, lol icon are the most oppressed group in the world. I said to her, fuck off, when she said there is only two genders. She said she's sorry and wants to get along in the server despite our differences. I said, my politics are important. I'm not going to be friends with her and cannot talk to her, and I'm the monster now. Can you be friends with conservatives? You probably won't be surprised to hear me say this, but I'm completely on your side in this. I know we differ on politics from time to time, occasionally pretty drastically, but you're completely in the right on this. I agree with you 100%. And can you be friends with conservatives? My answer is no, not if you can help. If you can help it, no, and you shouldn't be. And especially with this kind of conservative who, I mean, like, what I find hilarious about this is you say that this person says ableism is just Tumblr shit, which implies that the only people who complain about ableism are people who are like, extremely online people who don't know about the real world. And yet this seems like the attitude of someone who is an extremely online person who doesn't know about the quote unquote real world, who doesn't have any sense of how people think and act and believe and go about their lives, who aren't on the internet a lot, who don't spend a lot of time online or in social media communities or on Tumblr or whatever, because ableism is not a Tumblr thing. It's not an online thing. I know people, I mean, some of them I met online, but I know them, as personally, not just, as people that I interact with, on because I follow them on Twitter or something. Who experience ableism, who have disabilities of one form or another that cause them to experience ableism, and they talk about it and they complain about it and they talk about how unjust and unfair it is and how much it sucks, and they are not quote unquote Tumblr people who are just whining about quote unquote Tumblr shit. Like, it's such a privileged, not just privileged, but really, really shallow, poorly informed, narrow point of view to be able to just dismiss a widely experienced form of persecution as Tumblr shit, right? Because the only people you see complaining about it are people complaining about it on Tumblr and in social media, because that's your life. And you assume like, well, people in the real world don't care about this shit. It's just these online people. Like, no, you're the online person. You're the online person who is missing the bigger picture. And you're thinking that the people complaining are, but it's not, it's you. If you looked around at the rest of the human experience outside of the particular corners of the internet you pay attention to, you would see that actually it's not Tumblr shit at all. It affects the lives of a lot of people. So that's what I find particularly amusing and also really annoying about this, is that it's another case of someone doing some projecting, claiming that all of these problems are just made up problems, perpetuated by, online people who don't have any actual real world problems. And it's being, and actually they are the person who seems to be the extremely online person who doesn't understand how things actually operate in the real world, especially for people who are the targets of the kinds of bigotry and discrimination that they are dismissing. So yeah. And, the lol icon are the most oppressed group. Okay, sure. That again, that sounds like an extremely online person. So yeah, I'm completely on your side. It sounds like you behaved totally reasonably when you told her to fuck off. And can you be friends with conservatives? I mean, you can, but why would you want to be, especially in a case like this? It's yeah, no. I think you're completely in the right. Agent Meister, Peldor Joy, Steve, I watched and enjoyed your recent video about Wei-Un, but I couldn't help but notice that you poo-pooed Shinzon's place among the great Trek villains. Now, I'll be the first to admit that he is no Khan, Q, or Dukat, but in Shinzon's defense, he was the first bad guy in nearly 50 years of the franchise to come up with the idea of shooting that giant bullseye that has been on the top of Starfleet ships for over 2 centuries, aka the bridge. He seems to have started a trend, as the Xindi did something similar in the Enterprise episode Twilight. I know you hate Nemesis, but you got to admit that the battle between the Enterprise and the Scimitar at the end is pretty badass, right? Try watching it while listening to something by Bon Jovi or Europe. It'll blow you away. Also, where was Kivas Fajo in your Who's Who of Trek villains? Also, you do know that with my usual opening, what my usual opening of Peldor Joy means, don't you? Because it will be on the test. I know that it is the greeting at the beginning of the Bajaran Gratitude Festival. I don't know what the exact translation is, but I know it's the Bajaran Gratitude Festival. But I don't think the battle. I'll put it this way: I haven't watched it for a while, so it's possible that if I watched it again, I might think differently. Especially if I crank some Bon Jovi or some, or some Europe, or I'll just blast like the final countdown while I'm watching the battle between the Enterprise and the Scimitar at the end of Nemesis. I haven't watched it for a long time, but I don't remember thinking there was anything remotely special about that battle. I actually thought most of the action scenes, both involving actors and involving the ships in Nemesis, were really, really poorly done. I mean, just really badly staged, not that exciting, not very well timed, not very well paced. I just thought the whole thing was just blah. It was just a huge misfire at every level, including the battle scenes between the ships. But again, maybe if I watched it again after not having seen it for a long time, maybe I would have a different opinion. But and I've seen the movie several times. Like, I've watched it more than a few times over the years, and it's just never done anything for me at all. And where was Kivas Fajo in my Who's Who of Trek villains? I guess I could have put him in there somewhere. I don't really know if he rates among the others that I named. I guess maybe I could have thrown him in when I did the little Gilligan's Island joke on the monitor, where I had two of them that were like, and the rest. And I only did two of them because that was Gilligan's Island. It was the professor and Marianne who were the and the rest. So in order for it to hopefully read to the people who would get that, for it to read as a Gilligan's Island joke, I only wanted to use two. And I didn't choose Kivas Fajo. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely a bastard. Like, he's definitely a bastard. I don't know if he's like a Dukat level bastard. He's not, but he's not even really a Harry Mudd level bastard, but he's pretty bad. I mean, especially the way he murders his assistant and then basically tells Data, like, you can't stop me. I'm going to keep doing it. He's a pretty dark, evil prick. So, but in terms of scope, maybe he doesn't quite rate with the others, but he's a great villain, by which I mean he's a horrible person who does horrible things. As played by a fantastic actor, Saul Rubinek, who just does a great job as Fajo. Jay Sutton says, good evening, Steve. I am the newborn son of your Patreon supporter, Steven Sutton. This is the first Ask Away since I've been discharged from the hospital. So my dad has kindly offered his question to me this time around. Well, what a beautiful gift to give your newborn child. I was going to ask what your all-star bridge crew lineup would be. However, Dad has since admonished me for this and suggested I ask something else. So here goes. Do you have a favorite road not taken concept with Star Trek? Something that almost happened but didn't. Not to say that you wished they went with this version, but that you'd like to see a glimpse of this alternative TV show. Yes, I have two. And one of them is one that I definitely wish they would have gone with. And I think it would have been a much better series if they had. And the other one is something that I'm in the long run, I'm glad that they didn't go with it. But it's a really interesting possibility to ponder because of the changes it would bring about. And so the one I think that they should have actually gone with is, I would have really loved if they would have maintained the separation of and the conflict between the Maquis crew members and the Starfleet crew members on Voyager. I thought that was one of the most interesting parts of the initial premise of Voyager, um, that it wasn't just the Starfleet crew that was stranded in the Delta Quadrant, that it was also the Maquis crew, many of whom were former Starfleet, who were very bitter about Starfleet and the Federation, and had left, and become sort of enemies to the Federation. And now these two groups are stranded in the Delta Quadrant, decades of high warp from home, and they have to work together to get home. But the show basically resolves most of the conflict between those two sides in the second episode. Like, it's really at the end of the first episode. It's kind of like, well, we're all going to wear the same uniform and we're going to be on the same ship and we're going to be one crew. Oh, okay. Like, that kind of sucks. It really, it takes a lot of the dramatic tension out of that premise. If they had kept the separate Maquis ship, if Chakotay had remained the captain of his Maquis ship, and, maybe Voyager and the Maquis ship traveled together, like they always were in the same area as each other, but they weren't all on the same ship. And Chakotay was still in charge of his people, and Janeway was in charge of her people, but they had like a working agreement, that could have been really interesting. So that's a road not taken that I think they should have, knowing how bland and boring Voyager turned out to be. I think that is a road not taken that they probably should have taken. And the other one is, and I made a video about this a little while ago. If Picard had not actually been rescued by the Borg and Commander Riker had become Captain Riker permanently, and the second half basically of TNG was under Commander or Captain Riker in charge of the Enterprise instead of Picard. I'm glad they didn't do that, because I love Captain Picard, and I think the show, had some of its best years in the seasons that followed Best of Both Worlds when Picard came back. And so I wouldn't have wanted to lose Picard as a character, and you wouldn't have wanted to lose Patrick Stewart as a presence on the show. But if they had, that would have been a really, really interesting change. And imagine how assuming it would have gone well, by the way. I mean, the writers could have just completely floundered and had no idea what to do, but assuming that they rose to the challenge, think of how different the show would have been if the personality of the show were more determined by Riker than by Picard. And also think about how maybe they would have changed Riker a little bit to make him a little bit more captainly. You wouldn't have wanted to completely change his character. That would have been a terrible idea. You wanted to keep him the same character he had been, but evolve him a little bit so that he becomes a little bit more of a commander. He becomes a little bit less of, the guy who leans against the console and jokes with the crew, and more of the guy who is like, no, he's an affable, friendly guy. He's approachable. You can go talk to him about stuff, but let's make no mistake, he's in charge. Like, that could have been interesting. I'm glad that they didn't take that road, because I like TNG the way it is, but it's a very, very interesting possibility if they had. And I totally would have watched that show. Matthew Lordy says, hey, Steve, I believe that one time you had mentioned that you do not like dating, and we're glad that those days were behind you. Despite this, would you happen to have any dating advice for men, specifically those who have had trouble getting into committed relationships or struggling through the vagaries encountered in online dating? Are there any lessons you wished you had learned in retrospect? Wisdom to impart to those of us trying to make sense of all of this. Hope you are doing well and are prepared for the cold winter months ahead. Thank you very much. I am doing well. I am prepared for the cold winter months ahead. I guess the heat works in my house, so I think I'm good. No, I have no advice. I mean, I have no useful advice. I'll tell you this. I think whether you're talking about in-person dating or online dating, the best advice, both when it comes to finding a compatible mate and in making sure that you always treat people the right way and you don't ever fall into, even unintentionally, sort of fall into the trap of mistreating someone or trying, misbehaving in any kind of way in a dating situation or a relationship situation, is just don't force anything. Let things happen naturally. It doesn't mean like, don't take chances or don't stick your neck out there every once in a while, but just don't try to make anything happen that isn't naturally going to happen anyway. It's like baseball. If you are at bat, you, you have to wait for your pitch, you know, and you can't force the pitcher to throw you the pitch you're waiting for. You can't swing wildly at any pitch that comes near the plate, because most of the time that's going to end up in failure. Or if you do somehow manage to slap a hit, you might get on base, but if you had waited for a better pitch, you might have gotten a double or a triple or hit a home run. So be patient, wait for your pitch, and if a good opportunity comes along, if the right person comes along, then take advantage of the opportunity, and explore it and see what comes of it. But don't the idea of, what advice do you have for people who have had trouble getting into two committed relationships? Just don't get in with that mindset. Don't start with the mindset of, I'm looking to get into a committed relationship. Just try to look for someone who you get along with, who you have chemistry with, who there is a mutual attraction there, who you have things in common with, things you can talk about, things you can do together. Look for that. And I mean, there's no useful advice I can give you as to how to go about that. But that the best that's the only wisdom I can impart to you, is just don't wait for it. Be patient, wait for your pitch. Don't swing at things outside the strike zone. Scott Paulette says, so I saw the new Dune movie this week, and while overall I enjoyed it, I can't help but feel that the desert planet trope is kind of overdone in sci-fi science fantasy at this point. Now, I know Frank Herbert's story predates and greatly influenced a lot of the sci-fi we all know and love today, so I don't really blame this movie in particular for perpetuating the trope, but I think it's valid to say that some modern franchises may have gone a bit overboard with it, Star Wars. So my question is, do you think the well of interesting settings and locations for sci-fi to take place in has dried up? Has there been any sci-fi you have watched recently that had a very unique or underutilized setting that deserves more attention? I think that the story makes the setting. So, I mean, I agree with you that the desert location has been overused, and I do think Star Wars is in great measure to blame for that. I do think the Star Wars franchise, especially in the prequels, went back to desert planets, particularly Tatooine, way too often. I remember thinking in the second prequel, in Attack of the Clones, when they went back to Tatooine again. I think the first time I watched it, when I was sitting in the theater, I thought, we're going back to Tatooine again? Like, in this entire galaxy of possibilities, we're going back to Tatooine again. Okay. Like, it felt like, oh, sure, let's go back here again. The planet that Luke couldn't wait to get the hell away from. Let's go back there again. But that had less to do with the fact that it was a desert planet and more to do with the fact that it was just, we're going back to Tatooine again. And like, oh God, who gives a shit about Tatooine? So I think the story makes the setting. I think the problem isn't that interesting settings have dried up. I think the problem is that, if the settings are repetitive, the stories aren't good enough and compelling enough to overcome that. So you're not as interested in the story, and you kind of fall back and focus on, oh God, it's another desert planet. Like, Jesus, it's, I know that tends to be how I view things. Like, if I'm not enjoying the story, then I start to notice like the nitpicky stuff, and if I'm into the story, the nitpicky stuff doesn't bother me. So if I'm noticing shit like, is this another desert planet? Like, it probably means I'm not engaged in the story, because if I was engaged in the story, I wouldn't give a shit if it was another desert planet. And has there been any sci-fi I watched recently that had a very unique or underutilized setting? I don't know. I mean, I can't say it's underutilized, because I don't know how practical it would be to do this for a lot of different movies, but I thought two of the major planetary settings that we see in the movie Interstellar were really interesting. I thought the water planet that they land on, where it's like I don't think the entire planet was nothing but an ocean. I think there might have been some land on it somewhere, but it was the part of it that we saw was just an ocean, and it was so scary. Like they're sort of in their ship floating in this endless ocean that stretches forever in all directions, and then these massive waves are coming toward them that are like, you know, the size of buildings just crashing towards them. And it's, you know, it was, you know, it was a really effective uh way of building suspense. You know, like, are they going to be able to get the ship ready to take off in time, or is this wave going to hit them and kill them and crush them? And you know, it was a really impressive visual, and having them in the water and having to struggle to stay above water and get swim back to the ship and all that stuff, like it was really, really well done. So like, you know, some kind of water planet maybe. And then also the planet that they're on, in not at the very end, but you know, I think it's the planet they end up staying on, right? That it's kind of like an icy crystalline type place. That was an interesting setting as well. And again, I don't know how practical it would be to have a planet like that. I imagine it was pretty expensive to build that setting, or however they created it to create that setting. But yeah, kind of an icy crystalline type planet was really interesting too. General Contact Unit Problem Child, the bisexual Superboy thing. Should leftists respond when conservatives try to bait us into culture war debates about media? Most elected Republicans don't really care about this stuff, but they know their substantive policies are unpopular, so they have to gain support by virtue signaling about how they're against all the cultural trends their base feels threatened by. Besides that, it has the added advantage that it forces progressives to spend time rebutting that stuff when we'd rather be talking about how awful their policies are. Basically, every moment we spend writing or talking about how the Owl House is not turning kids gay is time we're not talking about medical care, the deficit, or any number of substantive policy disputes the GOP are dead wrong on. So that being the case, what should we do? Some leftists say we should just ignore the culture war, but I think it would be really bad if conservatives could just be like, Steven Universe is turning kids trans, and no one disputed it. I agree with you. I don't think we should ignore the culture war stuff. I think we should push back when because what it is fear mongering. And I don't think Republicans should be allowed to just fear monger unopposed. But I do also think there needs to be a balance, you know, and this is something that I think Democratic politicians are often really bad at. And maybe Democrats and liberals and leftists in general are bad at it, is the sense of proportion and trying to come up with some sort of reasonable division of labor, where yes, some of us should be challenging conservatives on these, you know, complaints that they're raising about media and, you know, the coarsening of the culture and such is the LGBTQ agenda. And, you know, this show is turning kids gay, or this show is turning kids trans, or this show is undermining democracy, or this book is whatever. We need to push back on that stuff because that stuff matters. That stuff is important. But there also need to be enough of us left to drive the incredibly important conversation on what you refer to as the substantive stuff, on policy, on government policy. That is important. That is very important. Arguably, that's more important than the culture war stuff, but the culture war stuff is still really super important. So I think we need to do both. And there are enough of us that we can fight a war on multiple fronts. We just need to be aware. And even we as individuals can do both. Like I try to talk about cultural issues and also about more substantive, you know, practical, what can we do here type stuff. I don't think the balance is perfect on my channel. I think I talk about the cultural stuff a lot more than I talk about the more practical stuff, but that's okay. I think not every single one of us needs to be perfectly balanced, but we as a political entity need to be willing and able to push back against both, because I do think both are important. I don't think we should just ignore it. I think that is a mistake. But we need to have a sense of proportion. Wolfie Basach says, hi, Steve. Once upon a time, a young Wolfie was told bedtime had been put back an hour, and for the first time, he experienced Star Trek. The show was awesome and exciting. Above all, the music, especially the melody, was amazing. It built up tension and created a crescendo of excitement when a mile-long turd was about to engulf the heroic captain. I know exactly what episode you're talking about. Months later, he persuaded his mother to take him to see Live and Let Die, where another hero served queen and country by inflating a drugs baron and tricking a young woman half his age into bed. Again, the music was incredible. Decades later, though, during the TNG era of Trek, the fantastic melody lines seem to have been lost, and the tingle of excitement during action sequences only now occurs when revisiting the TOS era. And so my question is, fantastic show regardless, how do you feel about the music in Trek? Are you satisfied with the basics of the right instruments playing the right rhythms, or do you think a great melody is significant? Well, no, a melody is very important, yes. I think the most memorable Star Trek themes or Star Trek scores are the ones that have had recognizable themes that you can hum or that you can sort of grab onto with your mind and be like, like my favorite Star Trek movie score is Star Trek Two, is the Wrath of Khan, which has an absolutely gorgeous main title theme with a really recognizable theme that is different from the other Star Trek movies. Um, and I think that's important. And I think the Next Generation and the Deep Space Nine era scores, I think the more memorable ones certainly are ones that have memorable melodies. It's interesting. Other than the Amok Time fight music and the main title theme, I don't really remember a lot of specific music from TOS, and or if I do, it's little cues that they reused multiple times. Like the sort of whimsical, funny music that they would play when something funny happened. The dun 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 dun. Da, 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 they kind of danced off like it was sort of like something goofy just happened. Like I remember they use that music cue a lot. And and I the Amok Time fight music is iconic, but I tend to remember the music from TNG and Deep Space Nine a lot more and from the movies as well, a lot more vividly than TOS. I think it's one of those instances where it's the subjectivity of the thing. You remember the music from the show that was your first Star Trek that you imprinted on, and that's the music that you really love and remember. And for me, because I came in with the movies and TNG, I tend to think of that more as my thing. But yeah, I do think a melody is very important. I do think a melody is very important. Orion McMurray says, "Do you think the design of the Batleth sword was stolen from a rocking pizza cutter?" Just thinking it will be funny seeing Worf wielding one while cutting Riker's pizza. That is hilarious. Yeah, except they put the blade on the wrong side, right? Because if it was a pizza cutter, then the sharp end of the battle should be the outside, but the sharp end is actually the inside. But yeah, I think that's hilarious. I think it would be great if, like, you know, if maybe they did a Deep Space Nine episode where, after Worf and Jadzia were together, where Worf comes home and he's just gotten off his shift and he like takes off his sash and he's like sort of getting relaxed and he looks at the wall of their quarters and he's like, what happened to my Batleth? And then he walks into the next room and there's Jadzia there cutting a big giant pizza with it, and he's like, that's my father's Batleth or whatever the fuck. I think that would be really funny. But yeah, that's I never thought of it that way, but it does remind me, now that you've mentioned it, it does remind me of one of those half circle pizza cutter things. Relic 5000 says, greetings from Canada. This week is Asexuality Awareness Week. It's a time when asexuals, aces, such as myself, remind people that we exist. Asexuality is very much the forgotten or invisible orientation. Most discrimination towards us comes in the form of people not believing we exist. See Some Random Geek's previous question there. Or thinking it's some kind of phase. Asexuality is simply a lack of attraction to anyone of any gender. It's the opposite of bi slash pansexuality. There is also gray sexuals who experience limited attraction and demisexuals who experience attraction only after a strong bond is formed. Thanks for reading my TED Talk. I can't think of a question to ask this week. I just wanted to do my bit to raise awareness of asexuality. Well, that is great. I'm glad that you did. I didn't really address this in Some Random Geeks question, but that bit about where his former friend also mentioned that they don't think that asexuality exists. Obviously, that's bullshit. I see no reason to doubt that asexuality exists, to doubt that it is a real orientation. Why we should be suspicious or overly skeptical of people when they are describing their own inner experience to us. I have no idea. I do not know why asexual people would be making that up. I do not know why any of the rest of us should care if they were or not. Who gives a shit? If it is the way you feel and the way you live your life and the way you interact with people, what is there to gain by oppressing you or denigrating you or doubting you or saying that, well, or, insulting you by saying like, well, it's probably just a phase, or, you don't really, there's actually no such thing. You might think that you're asexual, but you're really not. Nobody really is. Like, the refusal or inability to even imagine, to even fathom that someone's experience could be so different from their own. Like, just because I, as a heterosexual person, I cannot imagine going through life not feeling sexual attraction to other people. Like, that's just unfathomable. You're not sexually attracted to anybody. That can't possibly be true. But it is. And the fact that I, in this hypothetical scenario, could not imagine it has no bearing on reality. It doesn't matter if I can imagine it or not. If that is the orientation of other people, if that is the experience of other people, then that's the way it is. So yeah, I'm very happy that you took the opportunity to raise some awareness for aces, and I think it's great. I think aces deserve the same respect that people of any other sexual orientation deserve, and yeah, ace awareness. Good TED Talk. Here's one from Jacob Monroe. Oh, a wrestling question. I love these. Why does Cody refuse to turn heel? Is it a work? And for those of you who don't know, very quickly, he's referring to Cody Rhodes, who is one of my favorite wrestlers, who is a babyface in All Elite Pro Wrestling, which is the wrestling that I watch on Wednesdays and Fridays usually. Cody is a babyface, but Cody has been getting booed by the crowd recently. For about the last couple of months, actually, he has been getting very negative reactions from the crowd, despite being a babyface. And usually when that happens, what that means is that the crowd has grown tired of this wrestler, especially in that particular role. They don't want to cheer them anymore. And usually the remedy for that is to just go ahead and go with what the crowd is doing anyway and turn that wrestler heel and say, you know what, if you want to boo him, go ahead and boo him. And I don't know why Cody doesn't want to do that. I don't know if it's his ego. I don't know if he feels like he can get the crowd back on his side. If he can, judging by the promo that he cut on Dynamite this week, that seems to be his thinking, that, turning heel is too easy. So he doesn't want to do that. He wants to stay a babyface and get the crowd back on his side as a babyface without turning heel. I don't think it's a work. It's pro wrestling and it's on TV. So obviously it's all a work to a certain degree, but I do think that the reason I don't think he really wants to turn heel. I wish he would, as a big fan of Cody, because, what he looks to be trying to do to win the crowd back as a babyface when they've kind of had enough of him is really, really difficult to do. Whereas turning heel, when they're booing you already, and then getting over as a heel, and then eventually turning back babyface, that has worked again and again and again and again. It almost never fails if the person who does it has the capability to get over and knows how to work a crowd, which Cody definitely does. And Cody is a great heel. He's played heel in the past, and Brandy is a great heel too. His wife, who is, often in his corner or at ringside with him during his matches, she's a great heel. So I have no idea why Cody doesn't want to turn heel. If I were him, if I was playing babyface and they were starting to boo me, I would turn heel. I would turn on Arn Anderson. I would leave him a bloody mess. I would beat the shit out of him in front of everybody and have him stretchered out, and he wouldn't be on TV for a couple of months. And I would say, this is for all, you know what, Arn? I've had it. You got in my face. You told me I didn't have what it takes. You told me I didn't have the killer instinct. Well, how about this, motherfucker? And you know what? This is for my dad. This is for all the times that you and the rest of the Four Horsemen beat the shit out of my dad back in the 80s. To hell with you. To hell with you being my coach. To hell with your wrestling knowledge. Get the fuck out of here. That, there would not be a single person in that building that would not be booing the shit out of Cody. He would be the most hated guy in the company. And have Brandy turn with him. They can go back and do their awesome, Macho Man Sherry Martel heel act that they did in New Japan and Ring of Honor for a while. I think it would be fantastic. And then eventually the same thing would happen that happened last time. He would be so awesome as a heel. He would get over so well as a heel that they would start to cheer for him again. And then he could turn back babyface and he'd be over as a babyface. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why he doesn't do it, but I wish he would, because I think it would be a great move. Both for his short-term prospects as a heel and for his long-term prospects as a babyface. I don't understand why he doesn't want to do that, but maybe it's an ego thing. Joe McClory. So the video Dana dropped yesterday has had me thinking about another sort of advocacy that she has that you do not share completely because you think the goals are unattainable. I wonder if you could see yourself supporting anarchism in that way. Most research into cancer has said that the idea of a cure for all cancer or even a single cancer is unlikely, as the factors that cause it are so variable as are people that a single cure to even one type of cancer is unlikely to ever be found. However, in that search, we find safer and more effective treatments and diagnostic tools. On that same token, even if it is impossible to make a truly free and egalitarian society, wouldn't shooting for that likely lead us to a more free and egalitarian society than more somber and achievable goals? Well, I agree with you. And I mean, I think I kind of do support that. Just because I don't support, or I'm not really convinced of the viability or the practicality of anarchism specifically. I mean, I do think we should be setting, as Dana says in her video, setting goals that you won't be able to attain, and certainly not in the short term, but you set those goals anyway and you pursue them because you know that in the pursuit you will gain more than if you had set more modest goals. I am totally in favor of that. I'm not an anarchist, and I don't think anarchism is a viable endpoint. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I think we should only be pursuing small, achievable goals. I think we should be pushing for small, achievable goals, but I also think we should be, being more ambitious. Kind of similar to what I said to the previous question about, responding to cultural stuff versus focusing on more practical, legislative, political stuff. I think we need to do both. I think we need to think big and dream big and shoot for goals that, maybe aren't politically viable right now, but we need to push toward them. And I also think we need to also, not pass up more modest gains if we can. Goddamn. Not pass up more modest gains if we can reach them. So, just because I don't support anarchism doesn't mean that I don't think that it's a wise thing to sort of reach beyond our grasp, because we know that that's how we pull ourselves forward. I think that's a very good thing to do and a necessary thing to do. Siamak, who is pushing but not actually late. No, not even close. You had a couple hours to go, I think, when you submitted this one. Hi, Steve. I hope you're well. Well, here we are. I don't know that I ever truly expected better. No, I did, and that makes me sad. But we have a bill. No paid family leave eliminated the restoration of tax exemption for municipal funding. It is something, but it is far from transformative. Where are you on this? I'm resigned at this point to needing to pass something, and it seems this is it. Very sad that holding the line couldn't get something as simple as paid family leave left in. Also, I'm way upset about this, and I don't have or want kids. I'm kind of in the same boat as you are. I'm not super impressed with the spending bill, as it's being called, the sort of the domestic policy bill. I think a lot of the stuff that was dropped out was dropped out too easily, and maybe they should have fought for it a little more. And um, I will say it is more than nothing. It is something. It is not something to just be completely thrown in the trash can and say, well, it's, we just shouldn't even pass it. Like, if this is really the best that we can do right now, then this is what they should pass. But it does make me really, really sad that apparently this is the best that we can do right now. Um, I am disappointed. I think they should pass the bill. I think we should do what we can do, and then we should continue to push for the stuff that was left out of the bill. We shouldn't just give up on family leave. Shouldn't just give up on all of the things that were cut, or on, the higher levels of funding that were scaled back because Joe Manchin thinks that he has some arbitrary idea of, well, we shouldn't spend that much. You know what I mean? Like, fuck Joe Manchin. And we should totally kill the fuck out of that coal industry too. Sorry, Joe. But like, I'm disappointed. I am very disappointed. But like you, I'm resigned to, okay, if this is the bill, then let's just pass it. God damn it. If this is the bill, then let's pass it. And let's push for something more next time. But it does suck. The bill is not nothing. It has good things in it. It will accomplish good things, not transformative, as you say, but it will be progress. And progress is good. But I think we could have more progress. And I think we should be fighting for more progress, and hopefully we will be. But yeah, it's not something it's an accomplishment, but it's not an accomplishment I feel compelled to celebrate all that much. Isaiah Taylor says, so this is a Halloween ask away with a Star Trek The Next Generation theme. Which creepy TNG do you like? Troy being possessed by the horribly racist Paxons and the whole mystery clues conspiracy? The USS Britain from Night Terrors, or Aquiel? Maybe Isabella in Imaginary Friend. I have an idea. If I was directing Skin of Evil, once the memorial to Tasha is finished and the Enterprise D leaves, the camera then pans back down to Vagra 2, and we see Armus in his puddle form start laughing in a very sinister manner. He then begins to congeal. We then get a cut from Vagra 2 orbit as we see Armus zipping off the planet encased in a glowing red evil glow. The last scene then shows Armus shooting off at warp speed to kill the people who abandoned him as the end credits appear in red instead of that light blue. All along, the corny, creepy 80s horror music plays in the background. Pretty creepy, huh? Been really busy with my channel. 1,000+ views so far. Well, that's awesome. That's really great to hear. Yeah, I don't know if I like that Armus idea. If you're going for a cheesy, corny 80s horror movie, then yeah, that's totally... that's a great idea. And the big exaggerated laugh, like as he flies away. Depending on the tone you're going for, I think it works. Favorite creepy Star Trek Next Generation episode. It's not a great episode, but just in terms of the creep factor and in terms of feeling like a horror movie, I think I would have to go with Genesis, the one where the Picard and Data come back to the ship after being away for a few days, and the entire crew has de-evolved into more animalistic life forms, and the power is out on the ship. So the corridors in the ship are all dark, and things are beaten up and battered, and there's like debris laying everywhere, and like animal skins laying around. It's just it's not it's not a good episode at all. But in terms of the creep factor, and in terms of feeling like a horror movie, I think that's my favorite. It's like a fun episode to watch during the Halloween season if you want like a spooky Star Trek episode. Not a good episode in its own right, but for the spook factor, I think it's a good one. And finally, last question from the patrons and members, and this is from Dana, but not Ensign Clifton. And Dana says, "You've watched Lower Decks, and I haven't. Which Lower Decks characters are the most like our characters from the Ensign's log? Be sure to give lots of details, because remember, I have no idea who you're talking about." What a great question. Okay, so the four main characters on Lower Decks, the four main Lower Deckers are Mariner, Boimler, Rutherford, and Tendi. And of those four, the ones that are the most like our characters on the Ensign's log are, I think Jason is probably the most like Boimler, um, because um, Boimler is the one who is probably the most outwardly preoccupied with his career and with advancement and with wanting to, to get promoted. And he's not like bad at his job. He's nervous and he's good at his job, and I think that's close to Jason's personality on the show. I think that's close to, um, Jason's character, that he is, he's good at his job. He's very competent, but in certain social, and I mean, unlike Boimler, I think Jason is capable of being very competent and very smooth in social situations. He's not like a complete basket case like Boimler is. Um, but he does have that, if he's in a certain situation, or if certain things go wrong, or if he is threatened in a particular way, he can go completely to pieces and just become a wreck. And that's a very Boimlerish type of reaction to have. So I think if one of them is one of us, Boimler is Jason. I think the closest to my character on the show is probably Mariner, but there's a big difference between them that I think is important. I think they have their self-confidence in common, which is the big thing, and they have their indifference to being promoted in common, and their sort of indifference to their actual duties. The difference is that while my character on the show only thinks that he's really, really good at stuff, and is actually not that good at most of the things he's really confident about, Mariner actually is good at most things. Like, she is, like, really, really hyper competent at pretty much everything she tries. And that's one of the jokes, I think, of her character, is that she is like this, absurdly overdrawn Mary Sue character. Like, she's the Mary Sue to end all Mary Sue. She's good at everything. She's awesome at everything, and she knows it, and she's big and loud and confident about it. And that's my character on the Ensign's log, except I'm not actually all that good at all that stuff. I think I am, but I'm actually not. So with that difference in mind, I think in terms of personality, my character is more like Mariner. And your character, Dana, I think is probably the most like Tendi. Because Tendi is very enthusiastic, and Dana on the show is very enthusiastic and tries to be helpful and is very sort of outgoing and friendly, and often finds herself in the position of being the reasonable one. And I think that's probably closest to Tendi on the show, because Tendi is that sort of a character. So yeah, and also Tendi, just in a more shallow sense, Tendi works in the sciences division, and so does Ensign Dana Clifton on our show. So I think those are the closest. There isn't like they don't map identically onto any of the characters. Like, there's not like one that is obviously a Steve and one that is obviously a Jason and one that is obviously a Dana, or vice versa. But I think those are the closest I can come to in terms of their commonalities. But if anybody watching in the live chat has both watched Lower Decks and listened to the Ensign's log, and you have any other ideas, I'm sure we'd love to hear it. Because that was the last question from my patrons and my members, and it is now time to turn to my my people in the live chat and see what you all have had to say. So let's do that now. Let's see what everybody's doing. How is everybody? And see what everybody wants to talk about. Yes, CMAC is ahead of me in the Lower Decks thing. Yeah, exactly. The difference between my character and Mariner is actually competent. Kemp Chalmers asks, do you think Yuta was needlessly murdered? I feel like Riker vaporizing her was overkill. Oh yeah. I think it was definitely overkill. I mean, they tried to sell it by having her be unstoppable. Like, he kept zapping her with the phaser and it didn't work. And the idea was he has to turn it up all the way. He has to kill her in order to stop her. But I don't know if that came across quite as clearly as they wanted it to, because it kind of feels like he tried to stun her twice. That didn't work. So he just said, screw it. I'm turning this all the way up. He didn't try to tackle her. He didn't try to physically intervene to stop her from, committing the assassination. Like, it's just like, it seemed like there were a lot of ways out of that did not involve vaporizing her. But then again, don't forget, this is Riker, who straight up vaporized his own clone in season 2. He's a hardcore dude. Like, he'll kill a motherfucker. I was going to say he'll kill a motherfucker if he has to, even if he don't have to. He'll just straight up kill a motherfucker. So, we have to keep that in mind. But yeah, I think it was overkill for sure. Opinion no one cares about says Ensign Johnson is similar to Ransom. Yeah, I can kind of see that. I think even Ransom is probably a little bit more competent than Steve is on the show. But I can definitely see that in terms of character type and personality. And by the way, 255 AD, you're welcome. I'll wish your mother well on the show as well. I hope your mom isn't too badly hurt, and I hope she feels better real soon. And you're very welcome. CMX says that he thinks Dana's character is more of a Rutherford. That's interesting. Yeah, I can see that maybe a little. And Rutherford is my favorite character on the show, so I mean, I would never begrudge anybody wanting to be a Rutherford. Dana asks, how do straight people not understand asexuality? Don't most straight people have the experience of not being sexually attracted to some people? Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, you're not sexually attracted to every single person you encounter. So an asexual person is just someone who feels that way most or all of the time, right? Just think of how you feel about the people who you are not sexually attracted to, and then just imagine if you just felt that way about pretty much everybody. That's being an asexual. It's not that complicated, really. Um, 255 AD, totally ignoring the tragic accident. Should Alec Baldwin get shit for agreeing to work on a movie set staffed by scabs? Yeah, but I mean, everybody should. Anybody who crosses a picket line should get shit for it. Dana asks, who's not more competent than Ensign Johnson? He's, you know what? If you ask him, he's good at a lot of things. He has occasionally come through in the clutch. Not very often, because we don't want him to save the day too many times. But at the same time, you don't want him to just lose so often either. But he's fairly incompetent. There's a super chat I missed, by the way, from Nick Jeffrey. Thank you, Nick. Says, hi, Steve. While I totally understand your criticisms of the show, I really enjoyed Lower Decks. Also, do you have a spare kidney I could borrow? Are we a match? Do we need to take a test? I don't know. Is there no one else you can turn to for a kidney? Liam Foley asks, is there any Lower Decks character you'd like to see as a live action character? I mean, we already have seen Rutherford as a live action character, just not in Star Trek. We see him on Doom Patrol as Cyborg. Like the face is exactly this. His Rutherford's implant is exactly like they do Cyborg's head implant on Doom Patrol. It's uncanny. It's like exactly the same. Well, Dana, you don't have to ask him. He shares his opinion unbidden. That's one of his many charms. Daryl Letts has an interesting question. Who's my favorite celebrity who is also named Steve? That's a good question. I'm completely blanking on other famous Steves. Let me look this up. Famous Steves. Let me see. Ooh, Steve Martin. That's a good one. Um, Steve Harwell from Smash Mouth. Definitely not him. Ooh, Steve Coogan. That's a good one. Um, ooh, Steve Ditko. Great artist. A little crazy. I don't know if I can go with that one. Of the ones I'm seeing on this list that I just randomly pulled up, yeah, probably Steve Martin. I'd go with Steve Martin. You know, who doesn't love Steve Martin? Did you all see Only Murders in the Building? That was really good. And Steve Martin was excellent in that. So I'll go with Steve Martin as my favorite famous Steve. Steve Carell, yeah, Steve Carell is a good one. Yeah, Steve Buscemi, Steve from Blue's Clues. Oh, Stevie Nicks, Nick, that's a good one. Stevie Nicks, yeah, she can definitely carry a tune better than the rest of them. No offense to Steve Martin, who makes some excellent music, but I think he would agree with me that you know Stevie Nicks has a better voice. Um, oh, Jason's here. Hi, Jason. He says, remember Year from Hell from Voyager? Well, Johnson is in his. Oh, and that doesn't mean we're going to hit the reset button at the end of it, is it? Oh, let's not do that. Let's not do all that character development and then completely erase it. Um, although I actually think our show could get away with that a little bit more than Voyager could because we have actually done character development in our show. So even if we erased an entire year, there would still be some character development at some point. Um, does Steve Rogers count? I looked at CMX commenter. Does Steve Rogers count because he's fictional? Yeah, Steve. Yeah, Steve. I mean, Steve Harvey would not be high on my list. No. 25 AD says, with regard to the culture war stuff, do you think some of the blame falls on us because talking about media stuff is more fun than talking about stuff like the deficit? Yeah, probably. I mean, I personally don't think the deficit specifically is that big of a deal. Um, but I get what you're saying, like more sort of practical governmental type concerns. Yeah, I think it's probably partially our fault because talking about cultural stuff and entertainment related stuff is more interesting. I think that's a completely fair statement. Um, Opinions no one cares about says I've been watching the Saw series for Halloween and thought I'd ask my favorite cinephile. Well, you and Jason Ty. Aw. Do you consider them horror or just torture porn? I think I've only actually seen the first one. So I have not seen the entire series. So I don't know if it like descends into torture porn after the first one. I would call the first one a horror movie. It's a really grim horror movie. Like I think it would not be completely unfair to characterize it as in the torture porn category. But I do think it has. I don't think it's a great movie, but I think it has some merit as a film that raises it above the level of torture porn. So I wouldn't say that about the first one, but as for the other ones, I can't speak to them because I haven't watched them. Crystal Feynman has a talking about Star Trek music. The main themes from Star Trek 4 and Star Trek First Contact are pretty memorable too. Yes, and actually, the opening theme, the main title theme from First Contact is one of my favorite pieces of Star Trek music. It's really one of my favorite pieces of film music. Like it's just beautiful. I the first time I saw the movie and the opening credits are playing and it's that music, it's like this music is just this is too beautiful for Star Trek. Like it's a really, really beautiful piece of music. And it's for the Borg time travel movie. Like the disconnect between the subject matter and the beauty of the music is just stunning. But it's a great score all around, not just the opening theme. Jerry Goldsmith. It's a terrific score, but that opening theme particularly is fantastic. And Star Trek 4 as well, because it's very different from other Star Trek themes. Especially the main theme, the sort of the hero theme of Star Trek 4 is really, really wonderful. Steve Schmeling says, nice Paramount Superman shirt. Having watched your recent vid about bad movies, which category would you put The Room in? Don't be cheap, cheap, cheap. Thank you. It's maybe my favorite shirt. I love my Fleischer Brothers Soups shirt. And what category would I put The Room in? The Room is a tough one. The Room is one of those that is possibly a category buster. I think, gun to my head, if I had to put it in one category or another, I would put The Room in category 1. I would say The Room is cheap and shoddy. But it's not nearly as cheap or as shoddy, at least from a technical production standpoint, as a lot of the other movies in that category would be. Like, it's not anything like a Plan 9 or a Birdemic or, a Neil Breen movie or something like that. It's not nearly that level of technical incompetence. Actually, in terms of just sheer technical filmmaking, The Room is okay. It's workmanlike. It's not outstanding to any degree, but it's not like embarrassingly bad. Like, technically, The Room is fine. It's just artistically that it goes completely off the rails. So, but I think it's definitely not category 3. There's nothing like morally reprehensible about it. There's some problematic stuff in it, especially in terms of its depiction of women. And it suggests some really shitty attitudes about women on the part of Tommy Wiseau, but it's not to the degree that I would call it like morally repugnant as a piece. So it's definitely not category 3. It's either cheap but shoddy or fancy dud. And it's not quite fancy enough to be a fancy dud. So I would say it's the first category, but it's tough. It's close. It could go either direction. Random Geek, yes, the patron hangout is this Sunday. I will post a reminder about that on Patreon tomorrow morning and then also Sunday morning. But yes, just to get it out of the way, the patron hangout is this Sunday for patrons and members. Oh, hi, Steve. Oh, hi, Tasby12. John Burns, did you super chat? Thank you, my friend. Did you enjoy the Orville music? I think I enjoyed it. All right. I mean, I don't think it didn't it didn't blow me away. It reminded me of Galaxy Quest a little bit, which makes sense because the Orville is kind of like a cross between Galaxy Quest and Star Trek: The Next Generation. And actually, the main theme to Lower Decks reminds me a lot of the Galaxy Quest theme as well. I thought it was okay. And yes, your Riker question. I scrolled up to find it. Thank you for the reminder. Says, end of the book, Starship Troopers. The others are looking to Johnny Rico, but it's the lieutenant's company, not mine. Similar to the acting Captain Riker and Picard's Enterprise if Locutus is dead. Yeah, but I mean, eventually Riker, I think if Picard was really dead and they didn't expect him to come back, then Riker would no longer be acting captain. The way I would envision the show is he would be permanently promoted. So it wouldn't be an acting captain situation after that episode. It would be a full captain. But I mean, I'm sure they would pay, respect to Picard and, like Riker says to Guinan in Best of Both Worlds Part 2, the feeling that it's still Picard's ship, even though Riker is the captain. Dana says maybe Cody is stringing it out a little more. Maybe he is, or maybe he's not intending to, but that's what will happen. Maybe he'll try it. He'll try for a few more weeks to kind of get the crowd back on his side. And then eventually he'll say, okay, I'm turning heel, because he'll realize that it's not going to go the way he wants it to go. And then he'll turn heel anyway. And it'll feel like he was stringing it out, but he wasn't intentionally doing that, even though that's how it wound up. Something like that. But I do think it would be better for Cody to turn heel. Judy 580 says, should we point to those pointless super weapons whenever assholes are like, well, at least the Nazis were efficient? Yeah, that is oh boy, that would be a great thing to point to. Absolutely. That would be fantastic. Yes, we should. Super chat from Nick Jeffrey. Thank you once again. Says, how many lights are there, Steve? At the moment, well, right in front of me, there are two. There's one here and there's one here. But totally in the room, there's the two lights here that you can't see that are on me. Then there's another light over here that's above my bed that I have on. It's kind of like a general sort of ambient room light. And then behind me, there's a blue light over there. And then there's another blue light over there to give me the blue background. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 lights. Some random geek. If you were planning to dress up for the patron hangout, that would be wonderful. I am not. I am not planning to dress up, but if anybody who shows up to the patron member hangout on Sunday wants to dress up for Halloween, that would be terrific. Jesse Manning says, Joe Piscopo played the comedian in TNG. If they were making the series today, who do you think they'd pick as a representative comedian? Who would be a good comedian for them to choose as the comedian today? I mean, a good Patton Oswalt would be a good one. If they could give it to Hannah Gadsby, that'd be fantastic. Man, can you imagine how pissed off people would be if they cast Hannah Gadsby as the embodiment of a stand-up comedian in Star Trek? Oh, I would love it. Anthony Jeselnik, that would be terrific. There are a couple of really, really terrific stand-up comedians that are working right now that I think would be good for it. If I had to pick one for a Star Trek episode, especially, I think I'd go with Patton, though. John Burns with a super chat. Thank you, John. Says, craziest super weapon, a dive bombing heavy bomber. That does sound crazy, doesn't it? That sounds ridiculous. They spent money on that. Yeah, Steve, should I have said, there are 5 lights? Except that's not what he said. He said there are 4 lights. So I should have done it in the David Warner voice. Like, no, there are 5. That's a terrible David Warner, but I think I'm getting close to his tone. Tell me, how many lights do you see? And he's like, I see there's 4 lights. No, there are 5 lights. 25 AD says, would you want to see a Trek show set in the 29th century that focuses on time travel rather than visiting other planets? I think that would be really interesting, actually. Yeah, I've said before in videos that I think like something like a time Trek show. I mean, it would be an interesting direction to go that they haven't done yet. Instead, if they want to keep doing new Star Trek shows, right, instead of continually just doing, another show that is people on a starship, maybe do people on a starship, but they travel back in time. Like that might be an interesting angle to go through. I would be interested in a show like that. Sure. I would at least give it a chance. Yeah. Dana, I don't know if I've ever seen Leslie Jones do stand-up. I mean, back when I was watching Saturday Night Live, she was always a high point for me. I thought she was always really funny. And her Weekend Update desk pieces were often the only funny thing on the entire show when I was watching Saturday Night Live. So Leslie Jones is fantastic. But I don't know if I've ever actually seen her do stand-up, but I assume she'd be great at it. So yeah, I would see casting Leslie Jones as the representative of comedy in a Star Trek episode. Sure. I think she'd be great. CMAC, I don't know if it's raining right now. Let me check. It's too dark to tell. But I don't think it's raining right now, but it's been raining most of the day today. I wouldn't say it's been a monsoon, but it's been raining a lot. Yeah. Doesn't seem like it's raining right now, but I could be wrong. And if I am, there's no way for you to tell. I can lie all I want about how much it's raining. Liam Foley says, although I think it's important for the media to report on the crazy and dangerous things the right wing is doing, Do you think the constant focus on them just escalates the culture wars? Yes, I think the constant focus on them is bad. Yes, I do. I do think there needs to be more balance with other issues, because yes, it doesn't just it escalates the culture war in the sense that it lends credence to their complaints. If you're constantly talking about the moral panics that they're trying to whip up, you're just making it seem like this is something worth talking about when almost always it's not. So I do think that an excessive focus on those issues can definitely be very detrimental. John Burns says, "What's the Fermi paradox, and what does it have to do with future human exploration?" So, the Fermi paradox is the idea that uh, if there are other planets in the universe with intelligent life, given the age of the universe, and given certain assumptions that we have made about um, how common intelligent life might be in the universe, we should have seen something of aliens at some point by now. Like that's the Fermi paradox. That if there is intelligent life in the universe, we've been alive for long enough as a species, and our planet has been around long enough, and the universe itself has been around long enough that it's suspicious that we haven't had any kind of indication that there is intelligent life elsewhere by now. So, yeah. That's the Fermi paradigm. And what does it mean for human exploration? I mean, in probably for the next couple of centuries, it won't really mean anything because I don't think human space exploration, even if we do it the way I would like to see us do it, and we really prioritize human space flight and we make it a point to reach for the stars and to travel to other planets and to make it a goal to, find the nearest extrasolar planet and start planning some kind of practical, human mission to there. Like, even if we do all the stuff I would dream that we would do, it's still going to probably be a few hundred years, if even longer, before we get outside of our very, very, very local, stellar neighborhood. So whether there's life on other planets or not isn't really going to make much of a difference, because if there is life on other planets, we know that it's at least almost certainly not in our general neighborhood. So, you know, it's not going to have any practical effect on human spaceflight for a long time at all. Um, Dana says, "Why does being the embodiment of comedy have to mean does stand up?" Well, it doesn't, but in the specific episode that was referenced with Joe Piscopo playing the comedian, that was an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where he played like a corny old sort of like, Poconos resort stand up comic who was teaching Data the basics of comedy. So he was a stand up comic, and so I was going for like a parallel to that. But the embodiment of comedy doesn't have to be a stand up. But for that comparison, that's what I was going for. 255 AD says those Voyager episodes where they show us 29th century Starfleet, does showing that the Federation will still be around in 500 years ruin stuff like the Dominion War arc? No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I tend to prioritize the show that I'm watching. Oh, bye, CMAC. Thanks for dropping by. Um, uh, I tend to prioritize the show that I'm watching. So, if I'm watching Deep Space Nine and it's deep in the Dominion War arc, and I mean, you know, knowing that there's this other show that establishes that the Federation is still in existence in a few hundred years, that doesn't really have any effect on it for me. It's just like if you're reading comic books and you know you're reading like Action Comics, but then also that same month Superman is guest starring in one of Batman's books, and something that Superman does in Action Comics is contradicted by something that Superman does in his issue of Batman or something. Like, it doesn't really, I take both stories. I recognize that both stories, they're meant to take place in the same universe and they're meant to exist in the same timeline, but you know I don't get too fussy about if one contradicts the other, or which one takes place first or whatever. I treat them as kind of separate things, so it doesn't really bother me. Yeah, Jason, Opinionville, absolutely right. Considering the severe obstacles to traveling outside our solar system, it could be never. Yeah, it's entirely possible that we will never leave our solar system. That there will never be a human that leaves the solar system. Uh, you know, so yeah, I mean, so I really, if Fermi's paradox ever has any relevance to human spaceflight, it almost certainly will not be for a very, 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 very long time. Um, whether or not there is intelligent life out there will not be something we have to worry about in terms of planning human spaceflight for a very, very long time. And as Jason points out, it may never be something we need to worry about because we may never we may never be leaving our solar system. Um, Liam Foley says, "Do you have any desire to see the Eternals?" Um, I'm not going to see it in the theater. I'll watch it when it's on Disney Plus. I mean, I do want to watch it, but I'm not going to go to the theater to see it. I don't have any desire to see it that bad, but I'll watch it when it's available on Disney Plus, just like I will for Shang-Chi. I think Shang-Chi comes out on Disney Plus in a couple weeks, doesn't it? Like relatively soon. I'll watch. I didn't go to the theater to see it, but I'll watch it when it's available to me for sure. I will say I don't feel any like particular desire to see it. Like when I watch the trailers for it and stuff, it's not like, oh yeah, I can't wait to see that. It looks kind of interesting. It's based on a comic that I'm not really familiar with. Like I never read any of the Eternals comics, so it's not like I have a pre-existing investment in it. But the cast looks good, and I'll watch it when it's out on Disney Plus. But I mean, I don't have like a burning desire to see it in particular. November 12th. There you go. Thank you, Liam. It'll be on Disney Plus November 12th. Well, that's when I'll watch it then, or sometime very shortly thereafter. R2 Andel says, why can't either side find people to run that are reputable people for government positions? There are a few here and there if you look hard enough, but generally speaking, I agree with you. That's a big problem. I kind of wish the same thing, that we could find more reputable, competent people. I mean, with the Democrats, it's not so much reputable, although sometimes that's an issue for sure. There have definitely been some Democrats elected to high public office that have no business being there. I mean, the most recent example is probably Andrew Cuomo. But for Democrats, more often I find the problem is they just don't have guts. I would love to see Republicans with a fucking conscience, and I would like to see Democrats with guts. Yannick Muller says, have I ever watched Gareth Marenghi's Dark Place? It's on YouTube and I highly recommend it. That is on my to watch list. I have not actually watched it yet, but somebody hipped me to it a couple months ago, I think, and said like, this looks, I think you'll really enjoy this. And I looked at maybe a couple of scenes from it that people had posted, and it did look really funny, but I just have not gotten around to watching, full episodes of it yet. But it sounds really funny. And I think I'll really enjoy it, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Yeah. Okay, Dana, I didn't mean to disrespect your candidates running against MTG. That's very important. There are candidates. There's what looks like it's going to be a very robust, competitive Democratic primary coming up next year to nominate the person who will be running against Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia District 14, which is Dana's district. So we all wish them a lot of luck, and whoever gets the nomination, we wish that person even more luck. Serendum Geek says the people that want to be politicians are people who want to have power because this system creates positions of power. Hence, power hungry folks want those positions. Yeah, that does seem to be a problem. And I don't disagree with that. But I think it's a little more complicated than, so we should just get rid of power. Like, I don't know if that's really an option. John Burns says, does the U.S. have a spectrum of languages? What if they did? Can see English and Spanish, and then how many languages are there that originated in the Americans? This can only help unity. Do it! I think it would probably help if more of us spoke more languages, for sure. If we learned to speak each other's languages, yeah. But that's not going to be me because I just I think I'm at the point in my life where I just don't think I'm capable of learning another language. Um, Kemp Chalmers says, "Are you planning on watching the live action Cowboy Bebop series?" Yes, I am very curious about it. I am cautiously optimistic. I'm hoping that it will turn out to be a worthwhile project and it won't be just something that they do to do a live action version of something that's a recognizable property. Um, the trailer looks promising. The cast looks terrific. The little glimpses of it that I've seen have looked interesting. And it looks like hopefully it won't just be a live action retread of the cartoon. I love the Cowboy Bebop I am not like a huge anime fan. I haven't watched a ton of it, but of the anime that I have watched, I mean Cowboy Bebop is not just one of my favorite anime shows. It's one of my favorite shows ever. Like I love Cowboy Bebop, and so of course I'm reticent about the live action version. You want it to be, you know, to be something that is good in its own right and not just something that is, pointing at the cartoon and going, remember this, remember this, remember this, remember this. Like I hate that kind of thing. So hopefully the Cowboy Bebop show will not be that, but I am definitely planning on watching it. Yes. Um, 255 AD says, can you get invested in stuff like the Dominion War or the Zindi if we know from other shows that humanity or the Federation gets out okay? Does that undercut the drama tension? Not necessarily. No, I mean, sometimes it can. See, I would put that in the same category as I put like the nitpicky stuff that I was talking about earlier. If I'm engaged in the story, then it doesn't matter to me. If the story isn't grabbing me on an emotional level, if it's not engaging me through the storytelling and the characters and, et cetera, then I might start to think about something like, well, what the fuck does this even matter? We know from, this takes place in the 22nd century. We know the Federation is still there in the 23rd and the 24th century. Who cares? There's no stakes, right? Um, I could start to think that if I'm not engaged in the story, but not necessarily. It's entirely possible that I could, you know, quote unquote, know the outcome as much as you can know the outcome in a fictional universe, and still be invested in the story. If it is a well told story. Tasby12 says, someone mentioned the Twilight Zone. What's your favorite original Twilight Zone episode? Oh boy. And any favorites from the later iterations? The later iterations, not really. The most recent one that's been on that was CBS All Access, now Paramount Plus, the one that's executive produced by Jordan Peele, has had some promising ideas and a couple of decent episodes, but nothing that's really like blown me away. But I mean, it's been fine mostly, but not like super great. But so I'm mostly an original Twilight Zone guy, as far as like my very favorite stuff. And my favorite episode is probably it's I can't think of the name of it now. I'm gonna have to Google it. I feel like such a poser Twilight Zone fan. Nick of Time. It's the other Shatner episode, not Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, but the other Shatner episode. And it's one of the few Twilight Zones where you can read it as absolutely nothing supernatural happening. It's all about the mindsets of the characters and the superstitions, particularly of the Shatner character. It's the one with the mystic seer, the napkin holder, where you put a penny in the napkin holder and pull the lever and it gives you out a little card that tells your fortune. And Shatner's character becomes convinced that it is actually reading his future and that he and his wife have to stay at this booth in this little diner in this middle of nowhere town. And because this mechanical napkin holder is actually telling their futures. And he becomes convinced of this. And it's a great episode. It's my favorite Twilight Zone episode. I also really like A Game of Pool with Jack Klugman and Jonathan Winters. That's a fantastic episode. And of course, most of like the really popular, famous ones like To Serve Man is really good. Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is really good. Time Enough at Last is just a classic. So I mean, God, I love the Twilight Zone. I love the original Twilight Zone so much. But if I had to pick a single, oh, The Mind and the Matter is another one that isn't talked about a lot, but with oh God, now I'm really blanking on names tonight. Shelley Berman. God, and he who also played Larry David's dad in Curb Your Enthusiasm until he passed away, unfortunately. But yeah, Mind in the Matter is a great Twilight Zone episode too, with Shelley Berman as the lead. But yeah, if I had to pick my favorite, it would probably be Nick of Time. Jim Baker says, "Am I planning to watch The Matrix 4?" I'll probably watch it. Yeah, I'll probably watch it. Some Random Geek says, "How do I feel about the Netflix CEO doubling down on keeping Dave Chappelle up on Netflix and defending Dave?" I full disclosure, I have not watched the new Chappelle special. I thought the last one he did was bad enough. Like, I thought the last one he did was terrible. And this one, it's from the sounds of it, it sounds like this one was even worse. Do I think they should take it down? I think they should take down. Yeah, yes, of course, I think they should take it down. Would that kind of naked bigotry against any other group be tolerated? If that was a white comedian talking about black people the way Dave Chappelle talks about trans people, would that be tolerated? Of course not, nor should it be. So of course it should be taken down. Fuck yes. Why is this even controversial? But I do want to note that most trans people that I have seen discuss it have not asked for that. So that's kind of a false narrative. The people that are trying to say, like, oh, trans people, they're so sensitive. They're scared of a comedian. They want to silence Dave Chappelle. Most trans people I have read and seen talk about it have not demanded that the special be taken down. But I would just like to point out for my own part that, if it was a comedian talking about any other marginalized group in those same terms as Dave talks about trans people, it would never have been put up. Someone at Netflix would have watched it and said, holy shit, we can't put this up. And by the way, we're not paying you for this either. Like, this is horrible. So, I feel like that kind of speaks for itself. Um, 255AD asks, that country club your grandfather used to work at, are there any bullshit stories about it being haunted? Referring to Woodmont, the private hunt club that I made a video about a few years ago. I don't remember any stories about it being haunted. No. It was the clubhouse was the kind of building that, if you were given to believe such tales, it would be a good place to tell those kinds of stories. Like, it would be a good ghost story kind of setting. Because it's big and sprawling and cavernous, and there are spaces in there that you can get lost in, little dark, unexplored places. And if you walk through it at night with the lights off, it can be a really spooky place. But no, I never heard any specific ghost stories about either about Woodmont, like about the clubhouse, or about the overall property. But maybe there are some that I just didn't hear. John Burns says, how do you feel about conservatives canceling their Netflix memberships because of the show Cuties? I think anytime conservatives want to deprive themselves of entertainment in order to make a point that they think other people care about is fine by me. Like, you deprive yourselves of whatever you want because you think you're making some kind of great moral stand. Go ahead. Most people who aren't in your particular conservative bubble do not give a shit about it. So you go ahead. You go ahead and do whatever you think you need to do. Oh, Dana's leaving. Good night, Dana. Summer Geek says John Brockman thinks the problem with the Democrats is the Republican Party. The Thuglicans are fascist. The Democrats, thus, in a two-party system, are the non-fascist party. And being the non-fascist party is too big of a tent. No matter what they do, they will piss off someone in their base. Do you agree? I think the Republicans being so far to the right is definitely part of the problem. I don't think it's the sole cause of the problem. I think here's the thing. The Democratic Party has lacked courage. I'll put it that way, has lacked courage for a long time. Since before the Republicans were so mask off fascist as they are now. So the issue predates the Republicans being as bad as they have been recently. I think the Republicans being as bad as they have been recently has exacerbated the Democrats' courage problem and has made it even more urgent that they get over that and that they, find their guts and start actually waging, a stronger fight. Because we see how high the stakes are now. And it's like, the Democrats, you can't afford to keep doing this same bullshit. This is not 1992 anymore. You have to stop trying to fucking triangulate. Bill Clinton is no longer president. The Republican Party is not the same party that it was 30 or 40 years ago. And by the way, it was pretty fucking bad back then. But this pitching toward centrism and bipartisanship and, let's try to get people on board. And, that's the problem with that is that it alienates progressive voters who otherwise might support the Democratic Party and allow them to win large enough majorities in legislatures, state legislatures and Congress, where they wouldn't need to worry about getting 60 votes to overcome a filibuster or getting the Republicans in to support them. Like you could win enough seats that you could tell the Republicans to go fuck themselves. And that's what I think should ultimately be the goal. But so I don't think John's right that the Republican Party is the problem with the Democrats. I think it's part of it, but I think the main problem with the Democrats is that they just don't have the guts. They just don't have the balls. They don't have the determination to wage the kind of fight that they need to wage. And I don't think a lot of them are willing to admit who their enemy is and what the Republican Party actually is and to treat them accordingly. And again, and unfortunately, that has been a problem for a long time. That's not just recently. John Burns with a super chat says a majority of 30 states voted for Trump in 2016. Yes. I don't know off the top of my head if that's true or not, but I mean, he won the Electoral College narrowly. I don't know if it was a majority in 30 states or not. That sounds a little big. I'm not sure though. I mean, he lost the nationwide popular vote by quite a significant margin, but he won a narrow Electoral College victory. So there's that. But as far as did a majority of 30 states for, I don't know. I'm not sure. 255 AD says, just now I was trying to figure out what's wrong with my mom. I immediately looked at the worst possible thing it could be on the webpage. Why do we do that? I think it's just some of us, I think not just some of us, I don't want to, I think we all have that capacity. It's the same reason why people doom scroll on Twitter, when it's nothing but bad news, but you can't pull yourself away from it. And also maybe part of it, especially since you're talking about your mom, maybe there's some part of you that wants to prepare yourself for the worst. That wants to say like, okay, what's the worst thing this could be? I hope it's not this. It probably isn't this, But what if it is? Let me at least start to emotionally prepare myself for the worst case scenario. I think that's you know, a reasonable thing to do. Another super chat from John says, "So why did Trump win majorities in 30 states in 16?" Because we're a really dumb, really racist country. Like, I don't know what other answer there could be. We're a country that has a lot of really dumb, really racist people that live in it. And they bought Trump's act for whatever reason, and they voted for him. Tasby12 says, "I'm tired of Democrats trying to be bipartisan with Republicans. How long do they have to get crapped on before they realize that the Republicans are fanatics who can't be reasoned with?" Well, yeah, we are still waiting for the answer to that question. How long it's going to take. It should not have taken nearly this long. And John Burns also asks, "Is there anyone else who has a chance of winning the GOP nomination in 2024 more than Donald Trump? Are people willing to clap for Jeb Bush, Chris Christie, Marco Rubio, Richard Milhouse Cruz?" I really have no idea. I mean, it's difficult for me to imagine Jeb Bush, being viable given how far to the right the party has gone. And by the way, how fucked up is it that Jeb Bush seems like a reasonable candidate compared to the rest of the party? I don't think it'll be Jeb Bush. I don't think he'll even run. Ditto for Chris Christie. I don't think Christie will run it. Marco Rubio, maybe. Cruz, maybe. I can see Cruz being narcissistic enough to run, but does he have a shot at the nomination? I'm not sure. I really don't know. Kemp Chalmers says Ron DeSantis. Yeah, maybe. A lot of people are under the bizarrely mistaken impression that he's been a good governor. So maybe, I don't know. My state's governor, Larry Hogan, has talked about running. I have no idea why anybody would ever vote for Larry Hogan for anything, but people have discussed the possibility of him running as one of the quote unquote reasonable Republicans, as like an alternative to Trump. We see how well that worked last time, and the time before last, I guess technically 2016. Anyway, it is after 8:00, so I'm going to call these festivities to a close. Thanks everybody for the super chats, and thanks everybody for all the questions. I do want to remind everybody, as always, before I close up shop, to don't forget about the charity links that are maintained by our friend Some Random Geek. You go to the video description and find the link to charitylinks.page, and it'll take you to a document that has links to all kinds of fundraisers and legal defense funds and other things that are there to help out friends of ours who need a helping hand, who need a little bit of a financial pick me up. And if you have a few spare bucks and you want to throw it toward a good cause, you can't find many better causes than are in the charity links. So don't forget to check out the charity links. Also, don't forget that if you want to support what I do on this channel, there are two ways you can do it. You can either go to patreon.com/Steve Shives and become a patron, or you can click the join button and become a channel member. If you are not either one of those at this time, it really doesn't make a huge difference which one you choose. You can become a patron or a channel member. Either one really helps me out a lot. If you can afford to pledge higher amounts, that's terrific. And obviously that helps me out more. But if you can even just afford $1 a month, either as a member or as a patron, that really helps me out. And when you become a patron or a member at any level, you get the opportunity to ask questions for Ask Away streams just like this one ahead of time. And as you saw, I answer those questions first at the beginning of the show. I always answer patron and member questions first before I turn to the live chat. So those are some. And if you pledge at $5 a month or more as either a patron or a member, you get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. And also for any amount, for a pledge of any amount as a patron or member, you also get the chance to join us for the monthly patron and member hangout which we do on the last Sunday of every month, and that is this Sunday. This Sunday is our patron hangout, so that will be linked on social media on Sunday. And if you're a patron or a channel member, the link to join the video call and be a part of that will be posted about 15 minutes ahead of time. But we always go live noon Eastern time on Sunday, so that'll be this weekend. Also, don't forget that I co-host a couple of awesome podcasts that are a part of the Let Me Listen family of podcasts. There is Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I co-host with Jason Harding, where we give classic films a fresh review and see if they deserve their reputations, be those reputations good or bad. Our most recent episode is our review of the super spooky horror movie Evil Dead 2, an all-time classic. That's the new episode of Late Seating, and also just went up today is the new episode of our other podcast, the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed improv comedy podcast that I co-star in alongside Jason and alongside Dana, who was with us earlier. We play low-ranking officers serving aboard the Enterprise D. We are currently in the beginning of Star Trek TNG Season 2. Our episodes kind of take place parallel to the events of now Star Trek The Next Generation. We were in Star Trek the original series for our first 3 seasons of the show, but now we have jumped ahead to the TNG era, and we do our own thing. We tell our own stories with our own characters, but the events of TNG episodes are kind of happening alongside and in the background of our shows. And it's a really fun show. We're really enjoying it. We've had a really solid, we're in our 4th season now. We've had a really, really solid run for the last several episodes. I think we're really, really hitting our stride. So if you like Star Trek, if you like my Star Trek stuff here on YouTube, if you like funny Star Trek stuff, check out the Ensign's Log. The links are in the description to the Ensign's Log and to Late Seating, or you can go to letmelistenpodcasts.com to check those out and check out all of the excellent Let Me Listen family of podcasts. That is it, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you this weekend for the patron and member hangout. I'll see you next week for Trek Reluctantly on Wednesday with Dana, and then also on Friday for another live stream with Dana for Read Away. New videos coming out on Monday and Wednesday as well. Have a good weekend. Happy Halloween. And thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. See you later.